Shalom, everybody. Shalom. First of all, Ezra, it's a tremendous zchut, it's a tremendous honor to even speak into the same microphone you just spoke in. You know, if there was a Tanakh, a Bible written about our times, Ezra would be a foundational character in that Bible. He has fought the wars of Israel, the wars of the Jewish people, and as you see, I just walk in here, and he's so animated and filled with passion. That's why I believe he survived such an overwhelming traumatic injury, because he's just too filled with life to leave this world, definitely not before the age of 120. So Ezra, you should, Admev Esrim.
Thank you. I love you all. Thank you.
So I want to thank you ahead of time for your patience for my slurring. I'm quite record level exhausted because I woke up at 4 a.m., which is a little bit earlier than I usually do, to go to Ben Gurion Airport to greet 242 Olim, Jews that have made Aliyah, moved to Israel, left the exile, and come home. I didn't personally know any of them, but I have this sort of, you know, I had a voice in my head when I was lying in bed. Just turn over, they're not expecting you, but I just couldn't because it fills me with such joy and vitality to go there, and I have this big, long shofar. And they allow, because we're press, we have a press pass, I'm able to go right onto the tarmac. And so there's thousands of people there, but the first person they see when they're coming down the steps is me with this big shofar, blowing teka, shofar gadol cherutenu, blasting the shofar because, it used to be Jeremy's father, his grandfather, he walked from Russia, Siberia. We used to have long journeys, but now we get on a plane, 11 hours later we're landing, and it's sort of overwhelming, anticlimactic. The moment needs to be marked. Yeah. It needs to be marked, and there needs to be a historic, prophetic, godly marker, which is the shofar. Yeah. Right? That's what Mashiach, Messiah, is supposed to blow the great shofar, and the Jewish people come home. Wow. So I think every healthy Jew thinks they may be Messiah. I just heard, if I'm this tired, my ADD is going to kick in, and I'm going to be all over the place. But one of the 13 principles of faith is Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema. I believe with a full heart. Beviat HaMashiach, for the coming of the Messiah. Va'afal pishit ma'ameh im kol zeh achakelo b'chol yom sheyavo. That Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema with a full heart. Beviat HaMashiach. And if he tarries, I will wait for him. And I will wait for him with a full heart. But the word in Hebrew, achakeh, is wait, but it's also to imitate. To imitate. And I think that the message there is that until Messiah comes, we can't just sit back and say, well, please Messiah, come and ingather the exiles and sanctify God's name. We have to imitate him. We have to try to do that. Perhaps it's each and every one of us that does that actually hastens the coming of the Messiah. But for a Jewish Christian group, I think this is a lot of Messiah talk, and that could get us in a little trouble, even though it's sort of fun to do that sometimes. But I wanted to start with that because we're here at this conference, and it's about the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av. And what was the original sin? The original sin, arguably, the 10 spies, the evil spies. I can tell we're the last speakers here. A lot of people have done some serious damage as far as sharing. But yes, the 10 spies, they came back with an evil report, a fearful report. They said, we're grasshoppers in their eyes. How did they know what they were in the eyes of these giants? How could they have possibly known? As a matter of fact, 2 parshas later, 2 portions of the Torah later, we hear from Balak, right? The king Balak goes to Bilam, the sorcerer, and he says, there's this nation, and they're coming like an ox, devouring everything in their path. So now we hear from the inhabitants of the land that they were terrified. The spies couldn't have been more wrong, but they spoke evil about the land. And speaking evil about the land is speaking evil about God. It's speaking evil about the Jewish people, because the land of Israel, the nation of Israel, and the God of Israel were all interconnected. And so the rectification, Maimonides says, is Tshuvat HaMishkal. That repentance, when you repent for something, you have to go to the equal and exact opposite. So if the original sin was speaking poorly of the land of Israel, well then what is the rectification of our generation? To speak joyfully about the land of Israel. To share what the land itself does in our hearts. To share a good message, a positive message. We can do this. We are doing this. And I think that's part of the reason that this morning uplifted me so much, because I think since Tisha B'Av I've been a little bit down. And I wasn't able to just, the fast ended, I wasn't able to just get out of it. You know, I was telling my wife, I'm like, wow, it's a day later, 2 days later, I'm still feeling in the dumps. I mean, we went in the morning and we did the prayers and we fasted, but the day gets long, and so we watched a movie that we thought was fitting, Schindler's List. I haven't watched that in years. It was a traumatic movie to watch. It was a traumatic movie to watch. And then this morning, going to this arrival, there was people that were coming off the plane that were so overwhelmed with joy that they were like having not an anxiety attack, but a joy attack. Like this woman with her children in her hand, she's like, you know, and her tears were just pouring down her face, and the children jumping up and down. It was just a moment of the Garden of Eden. So that was a beautiful experience this morning. Yes?
Where were they coming from?
Coming from North America. Yeah. I think they're all from North America, right? On Nefesh B'Nefesh, yeah. On that point, yeah. Well, I'm going to make a blessing. If you would like to say Amen afterwards, you may. What does Amen mean? It's from Emunah. It means I too believe. You've heard of the term abracadabra, right? It comes from Avra Kedabra. I will create as I speak. And when we bless, I could just drink this water, or I could recognize that this water is from God and giving me a Mayim Chaim, water of life, and giving me vitality, and recognize that connection. And instead of just having a physical act, it becomes a transcendent spiritual act by blessing and having a moment of recognition. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro.
Amen.
Jeremy, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I thought I would, I was going to tell my story a little bit, but because I heard this the other night, Bob, when was it 2 nights ago?
Yes.
Everything's a big mix for me. It was a beautiful night. Beautiful night. You had a Jewish speaker, a Christian speaker, a Jewish speaker, a Christian speaker, and I got to hear the hearts. And it's incredible how converging our hearts are in humility and love and gratitude and awe of the times that we're in. I think that's part of what inspired Bob to do this whole thing. He wanted to just share this, renaissance in his personal life with Israel and the Jewish people. And so he stepped up and said, what can I do? And so this conference came out. So I got to hear everybody. So I wanted to share my personal story a little bit, but I thought I'd skip that because A, Jeremy's more interesting. And B, I thought I would just tell a couple little stories. Has anyone heard my personal story before? No. Nobody? That's right. I was in Darmstadt, Germany. That is a story. That was a story. I'm not going to get lost on it, but I'll just tell you this. Jeremy's giving me this look that he intentionally gives me to get in my head. Darmstadt, Germany. One of the most incredible places. I get off the plane and I'm taken to this Darmstadt, and there's a whole group of nuns and monks that are jumping up and down singing Hava Nagila. And they welcome me into their commune, I don't know the right words, it was all German. But I got out of the car, and all of a sudden, maybe 5 minutes later, there's an earthquake. An earthquake, and everyone hits the ground, And I was, what just happened? And then everyone comes out checking they're okay, and then one of the head monks comes to me, Brother Timotheus, and he says, you know, we haven't had an earthquake here since 1910. And now you come here. And I was afraid I was going to get blamed for the earthquake. And he said, you must be shaking the spiritual foundations and coming here. And I was like, that's a great commentary on it. I'll take that. Anyways, you know, when the 9th of Av, when we are mourning on the 9th of Av, it would be a tremendous mistake. The reason that the temple was destroyed is because we made the mistake of treating the temple as if it was a building. And we related to it as if it was a building. And for us to mourn the destruction of a building is perpetuating the very sin which caused it to be destroyed. The temple wasn't a building. It's a relationship. It's a relationship with God. Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach explains it like this. He says, imagine that you have the deepest, most heart connection relationship with someone. The type of love from a father to a son, a husband to a wife. There's the deepest bond and connection. And you meet that person by a certain tree. Right? And then the tree, you're meeting the person by that tree, and then the relationship is abruptly severed. Now, every time you go to that tree, you'll feel that pain of being there without that person. That's what the temple is. When we go to the temple, when we go to the Western Wall, our hearts are breaking because we remember the relationship we had with God. And what severed that relationship? It wasn't primarily sins against God. It was sins against each other. Sins against our fellow man. Because think about Abraham. Abraham was, he had his circumcision. It was the burning intensity of the sun in the middle of the summer. And God comes to him in a prophecy, in a transcendent prophecy we can't even imagine. And Abraham is communing with God, and then he looks out the door and he sees who he thinks are 3 pagan idolaters walking by. And he runs away from this prophetic experience with God to greet these pagan idolaters into his tent. And we learn from that, Abraham wasn't only not punished for that, we learn from that the laws of hospitality. That when you bring a guest into your home, you're bringing the angels of God into your home, because Abraham understood something that Noah didn't. Right? Noah, he found favor in the eyes of God, but why wasn't he ever called my beloved and my friend like Abraham? Why wasn't Noah the chosen one? Well, Noah loved God, but Abraham loved God through his fellow man. He understood that the highest way of actually manifesting love for God is through our fellow man. And so Noah had many, many years to warn people, though there's going to be a flood, no warning, it's between him and God. Whereas Abraham was Vayikra b'Shem Hashem, he called out in the name of God to all of humanity. He wanted to share God's love with the entire world. And so I don't think he was a missionary. People say, well, Abraham was the first missionary. I don't see it that way. I think that people would come into his home, and he was one of the wealthiest men, if not the wealthiest man in the world, and he would drop to his knees and wash their feet and give them food and talk to a part of their soul, a part of themselves they didn't even know existed. But just by his interacting with the highest part of them, they themselves had that part of them awaken. It wasn't about convincing them with words. It was about loving God through them. So I wanted to share 2 brief stories, and then I'll introduce Jeremy. So one of the stories is about our farm in the hills of Judea. Do you know about our farm, any of you? If I were to, I could show you pictures, and I could try to explain it to you in words. But even showing you a picture is the equivalent of showing you a sheet of musical notes versus going to a philharmonic orchestra. It's just impossible to explain the beauty of this place. And so Jeremy and I, we've been on a long journey together. He's my commander in the Army, my best friend. We had a radio show, we had a television show. People said, nah, you got better faces for radio. And we ran for Knesset. It wasn't even to get into Knesset, it was just to use the campaign as a platform to get the ideas out. But this whole crazy journey that we were on was for a certain mission. And that mission was to share our love for Israel with the world. And if you're in a car driving down to Eilat and you're on a mission going down to Eilat and your tire bursts, you don't cry over your tire and mourn the tire, you get in another vehicle. So our vehicles have changed so many different times, but our mission has always been the same and we're always on it together, and it's really from our friendship. Our friendship is what has kept us together and propelled us and strengthened us, and when he falls, I try to pick him up. When I fall, he tries to pick me up. And this whole journey led us to this farm, which you gotta come and see. And so the story I wanted to share, the first story I wanted to share, was about one of the seeds that were planted when I was 6 years old, that only blossomed now at this point in my life 1 year ago. So what happened, I was 6 years old and I stole a $5 bill from my mother's purse. Why did I do that? Well, my prefrontal cortex in my brain was not developed enough to know right from wrong, and there was a $5 bill. So I took it, it was there and I took it. So I go to school, I don't know what to do with this $5, and I had this friend named Adam. I gave it to him. He took it. Okay, his prefrontal cortex wasn't that developed either. So he goes home and his mom says, where did you get this $5 bill? He says, from Ari. So his mom calls my mom, they realize what happened, that I stole the money, and they ended up donating it to the school. And the school, with that money, bought a book. And they dedicated this book, in the front of the book, it was to me and Adam. Right? I don't know who Adam is nowadays, I hope he's doing well. But my name, Ari Abramowitz, was written in a book. That makes me an international superstar. I was really excited about that. And so this book, the story has stayed with me my whole life. Now what's the story? The story is that there were two friends that loved each other very much. One lived on one side of the mountain, and the other lived on the other side of the mountain. And they finally just harvested their wheat. It was harvest season, and they harvested their wheat. And one of the friends had 6 children, and the other did not have any children yet. So the one that didn't have any children yet said to his wife, you know, my friend and his wife, they have 6 children to feed. We don't have any children to feed. Let's sneak them some of our wheat in the middle of the night, and they'll have a little bit more wheat. We don't need to embarrass them, but we'll just give it to them in the middle of the night. His wife says, that's a blessed idea, you should do that. The same night, the other friend says to his wife, you know, my friend on the other side of the mountain, he doesn't have any children to help him in the field. We have 6 children to help us in the field. Perhaps should we take some of our wheat and sneak it over to them in the middle of the night? And his wife said, that's a blessed idea, you should do that. So they each do that, and they wake up in the morning, and they have the same amount of wheat. And they can't figure it out. Do you guys know this story? It happens night after night after night. They can't figure it out, and finally, after about 2 weeks of this happening, they happen to run into each other at the top of the mountain, right at the top of the mountain. They run into each other with the wheat over their shoulder. They see each other with the wheat. They drop the wheat. They embrace each other, and they cry tears of brotherhood and love and friendship. And the sages of Israel say that where those tears fell, that is where God decided to build the temple. Wow. That was Mount Moriah. The top of Mount Moriah, that place of friendship between fellow men, between fellow human beings. That is where God decided to build the temple on Mount Moriah. Okay. This past Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles, Shavuot, Pentecost, we harvested our wheat out at our farm. Now you have to understand, when you come out, there's this big, beautiful mountain. It's like a diamond in the crown of Judea. I'm telling you, it's unreal. And we've built a Beit Tefillah, a house of prayer, on the very top of that mountain. And on one side of the mountain is me and my wife, Shayna. We have not yet been blessed with children. We would be grateful for your prayers. And on the other side of the mountain is Jeremy and Tehillah and their 6 children.
Oh, are you kidding? Oh.
A little much, right? A little much. So it didn't even strike me until we harvested our wheat. And then we harvested our wheat, and I turned to Shayna, I said, Shayna, you know, Jeremy, he's got 6 kids. We don't have any kids yet. You know, perhaps we should sneak some of the wheat. And she's like, I know, I've heard the story. I know the story. Go ahead, bring him the wheat. 2:30 in the morning comes. And keep in mind, it's just us out there. So we even had to divide the night up. When he first moved out there, I guarded his house the first half of the night. He guarded the second half of the night. We don't have fences. We don't have security systems. And things are safe, thank God. But it took a while for us to acclimate. And so it's 2:30 in the morning. I throw this wheat over my shoulder. And I walk right by the house of prayer towards Jeremy's house. And as I'm approaching Jeremy's house, his dog starts to bark. And then the children start to cry. And then Jeremy comes out with his hand on his gun. He's like, Ari, what are you doing here? And I said, Jeremy, you know, you got 6 kids and I have this wheat, and I really thought you should have the wheat because you have 6 kids to feed. And he said, you're just looking for a place to put your wheat. Get that out of here. So it didn't exactly end the same way. But nonetheless, the friendship is still there. The friendship is still the same. And I tell that story because that is exactly, just on the way over here, Jeremy and I are walking here, and a woman accosts me in the street and says, why do you have a gun? Why do you have it? She's so infuriated at me that I have a gun. It would take me a long time to help you get into the mind of an Israeli secular extreme leftist. But I went on, I told her, listen, you know, there were numerous terrorist attacks, bulldozer attacks, where the terrorist was murdering people, and it wasn't a security or a soldier or a policeman, but just a Jew with a gun that ended the situation that killed the terrorist. Yeah. I don't want to ever have to use this gun, but in order to protect people, if I'm trained, I should do that. And she was just so livid, so angry. And Jeremy and I, no matter how angry she got, we were just like, listen, I understand. She's like, that's not what Jews are supposed to be like. Jews aren't supposed to be living out in the occupied West Bank territories. Oh. And Jeremy says, you know, we're called Jews because we live in Judea. You know, we're from Judea. That's the reason we're called Jews. But no matter what, we treated her with kindness and with love because it's so important that we're able to transcend whatever rifts and conflicts are between us. This is within the Jewish people. We have to love each other no matter what. Because when we're able to recognize that this woman and all of the extreme leftist secular people that want to destroy everything we've built, they can't without God's permission. They're not a threat against us. Like, what does King David say? Hashem li lo yira ma ya'aseh li adam. God is mine, I will not fear. For what can man do to me? When we understand that there's nothing to fear, they don't pose a threat, then we can just love them and have compassion on them and replace the anger and negativity with compassion. But it's not just amongst the Jewish people, I believe. If we're going to talk about redemption, if we're going to talk about Messiah, Mashiach actually coming, it's such a radical shift in the foundational perception through which we experience all of reality. Right? And think about what that means. We beat our swords into plowshares. What is the biggest industry in the entire world? Is the weapons industry. And no weapons are needed? How could such a thing ever be? The lion lies down with the sheep? How could such a shift in the consciousness of all of mankind happen? So, I'm going to tell my second story, and then I'm going to introduce Jeremy, or should I not? Okay, I'm going to tell it quickly.
You're doing great. Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay, so the story goes like this. There's two friends. They love each other very much. It's not the first story, don't worry. One, and this is many, many, many hundreds of years ago. They grow up together, but one moves to Syria and the other moves to Rome. The friend from Syria went to visit his friend in Rome, and when he was there, the king of Rome said, "You're a spy and I'm going to kill you." The man said, "I'm not a spy, I promise you, I'm not a spy. I can prove it." The king said, "You're a spy and I'm going to kill you." And the man said, "Well, please, let me go back to my family in Syria. Let me say goodbye to my family, to close up my business, and when I return, you could kill me then." The king said, "You think I'm a fool? You're just going to stay in Syria. You're not going to ever return." The man said, "If I don't return, you can kill my friend." And the king laughs and he turns and the friend says, "No, absolutely. If he doesn't return, you could kill me. It would be an honor." So now the king is intrigued. And he says to the man, "Okay, you have 2 months. Go back to Syria. If you don't return in 2 months, I'll kill your friend." So the man goes back to Syria. He closes up his business. He says goodbye to his family. They're weeping. They're begging him, "Please don't go back." He's not hearing of it. He leaves with plenty of time to get back, but on the way, his camel breaks its leg. And the ship isn't picking up wind. And it's taking more time than he thought to get back. And on the day of his execution, the execution day, he's running towards the center of the city. And he sees his friend there with the rope around his neck. They're about to kill him. And he screams, "No, don't kill him, I've returned, kill me, kill me." And the king sees this, but the man with the rope around his neck turns to the king and says, "No, no, no. It's 10:30. He had to be here by 9 o'clock. You have to kill me." The other man said, "No, no, no, that's not true. He just made that up. You have to kill me." And they're saying, "Kill me." The king can't believe his eyes. He says, "Stop. I'll make a deal. No one will die under one condition. That you make me your third friend." And really, when we have events like this, the 9th of Av, and God sees Jews and Christians coming together, and it's not, "Let me prove to you that the Messiah, and let me show you, and you're wrong and I'm right," and it's not about wrong and right. It's about, what do you need? Where is your hurt? How can I express love? How can I express encouragement? How can I express comfort? Well, where there's that type of friendship, that's where God's presence dwells. And that is exactly what is the deepest rectifying truth that will fix that original sin in the 9th of Av. Is not only when the Jewish people come together, but Jews and non-Jews come together with the recognition that there's one God that created us all, and that makes us all siblings. It makes us all brothers and sisters. And when we realize that, we could just beat our swords into plowshares. Speaking of plowshares, Jeremy Gimpel was just using one this morning. Working his garden. The guy is not, this is just how he dresses. He is now a farmer, musician. You got to see his music videos he's put out. Really, 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 really. The guy didn't play guitar 3 years ago. He didn't even play guitar. Talk about having the ability to totally, insanely reinvent yourself. And I don't use the word insanely lightly. It's true. He knows what I'm saying. Anyways, Jeremy, please.
I was trying to think before I got here what I wanted to say, because what is just a unique gathering.
Put the microphone in.
Is that better?
Yes.
So before I got here, I just kind of collected my thoughts saying, what do I have to say? I've never heard of an event where the nations of the world are coming to commemorate Tisha B'Av, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. That's just marvelous. And here's what came down, and this is what I'm going to deliver tonight. My grandfather, like Ari mentioned, walked from Russia to Israel in 1916 when he was 15 years old. It took him 1.5 years. And when he first arrived in Israel, he planted eucalyptus trees all around the area of the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. And you see those big, beautiful eucalyptus trees now that are like 100 years old. So my grandfather had a big hand in doing that. And today, Ari and I, we've kind of been sent to this very remote, barren area. And when we arrived there, there was no water, there was no electricity, there wasn't a single tree. And we've planted together now over 4,000 fruit trees, 3 vineyards, we have a small flock of sheep. And I just feel like it's something marvelous. I'm somehow continuing the legacy and the story of my grandfather, even though I never met my grandfather. But if I really tap in deep, I'm continuing the mission that Abraham started when he was first sent to this land. He came to this land, and there was a famine. It wasn't a very prosperous land. And he immediately had to leave. And when God had told him to go, he didn't even tell him where to go. He just had to sort of figure it out. God says, go forth to the land that I will show you. And then he forgets to show him where the land is or what it's called. And he also forgets to arrive at some point to say, Abraham, by the way, you've been walking for a couple of weeks now. I'm still with you. He doesn't ever have that conversation. So the Midrash, the oral Torah that was passed down throughout the generations, tells us about Abraham's journey. And for weeks, Abraham is walking with so many doubts in his mind. Did I hear right? Am I even supposed to hear? Is that normal? Am I crazy? What am I doing? I'm just walking. And of course, he encounters all of the evil forces of the world that are trying to convince him that he's walking in the wrong direction, that he didn't hear right, that he's a madman following voices in his head, that he thinks he can intuit the will of the creator of the universe. I mean, there's just a bunch of idols in the world. What is Abraham even talking about? And I feel as though when Ari and I were sent out to our farm, nothing about it makes sense. Until today, very little about it makes sense. And somehow on this inside of the inside, we're continuing Abraham's mission. And what was his mission? It was from the very beginning to build a country, a kingdom that would be a blessing to all families of the earth. That was the whole mission. And if you notice the Jewish people, we have this thing about us. Even the secular Jews, they're the heads of all these different organizations. They're like trying to save the whales, and they're trying to help equality in America, and they're constantly trying to fix things, trying to fix the world. If you ask any Jew in the world, what is the purpose of being a Jew? You can ask a liberal left-wing Jew in San Francisco and an ultra-Orthodox Jew in the old city of Jerusalem. What is the purpose of being a Jew? And they'll both have the same answer. They'll say, Tikkun Olam, to fix the world. That's what we're here to do. The world is broken. We were kicked out of the garden. And now we got to somehow figure out how to get back in the garden, how to make this world back into the Garden of Eden again. Fix that's why there's so many Jewish doctors. We can't help ourselves. We just want to heal the world. That's what we're here to do. So even if we're not so religious, inside us, I mean, in my family, you're either a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure. That's the way it goes. But the Jewish people, that's just the way we are. We just want to fix the world. We want to fix things. We want to plant. And somehow, that's also a part of the process, it seems. As the Jewish people return to the land, it's to settle the land, to rebuild the land. I mean, the land of Israel, when my grandfather came here, it was just swamps in the north and desert in the south. It was uninhabitable. People were dying of malaria because of all the mosquitoes. It was just a barren, desolate nothing. And you look around now, it's like unbelievable. What's happened, in 100 years? So rebuilding, it's like so hard to build. And it's so easy to just ruin it. It's so easy to destroy. In fact, if you think about that, that's a common theme. You sort of look at happiness. And I feel like I'm probably one of the happiest people I know. It's sort of like, there's like a happiness level there. But when you talk about pain and suffering, hell is sometimes depicted as a bottomless pit. Because when you look down, there's just no bottom. It can just always get worse. I mean, if you hear some of the stories of the Holocaust, it's like, well, this can't get any worse. Yes, it can. It can get worse, and it can keep on getting worse, and it can keep on getting worse. And it's like, my goodness, it's just like the pain and suffering is almost endless. It's just so easy to continue to fall and destroy and burn. I mean, there have been, over the last year, forest fires that were set off by like new kinds of terrorism. Hundreds of years. We've been waiting to plant trees and then water the trees and wait for them to grow. All it takes is a little bit of gasoline and a match. But somehow this rebuilding, this restoring, it's all a part of this process. It's like bringing the light. That's really what the Torah is. The Torah is the guide of how to walk in the light. And that's interesting because I think that's really what connects believers around the world. Believers in God. We just want to walk in the light. Yeah. We want to spread the light. And then what is the Torah? The Torah is the book of light. It's like, this is how you do it. Honor your mother and father. Love your neighbor as yourself. There's special times in the year, in the week, where you can sense a certain holiness. It's light. The whole book, it's like a guide of how to walk in the light. So if that's the truth, why is the Torah a story? That's interesting. The whole Bible is a story. Well, if it's about the commandments, if it's about the light, I mean, it's God's wisdom transmitted through the prophets of Israel. Why did he transmit it as a story? It's a little bit childish, right? I mean, if I want the law, then just give me the 10 Commandments and just make it a little bit longer. You know, wear these strings and do this on this day and don't eat this and eat that and honor your mother and father. It should just be a list of laws, but the Bible isn't a list of laws. The whole thing is a story. Inside the story, laws are delivered, and there's wisdom within the Bible also, but it's not just words of wisdom. There's the book of Proverbs. Well, that was written by Solomon, who was the son of King David, and that's a whole other saga and story. Meaning the whole Bible, Adam and Eve and Noah and Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, they go down to Egypt, they're enslaved in Egypt, they get out of Egypt, they walk through the desert, they go into the land of Israel, they build a temple, the temple is destroyed, they come back, Ezra and Nehemiah. The whole Bible is in the context of the story. Why is God's wisdom transmitted as a story to us? I mean, that's a really important question for anyone that loves the Bible. And of course, there are probably endless levels and different understandings to why that is. Here's one answer that really touches my heart. The Bible is delivered as a story, and the Torah is a story. Because the story isn't finished yet. We are the next chapter in that story. The vision that the prophets had and gave to us. And if you think just about that, the fact that we have the book of Amos. You know, our mountains are in the mountains where Amos received his prophecy. But imagine what it took. Amos had a quill and a piece of leather, and he wrote it down. And then that piece of parchment started to fade out. And then maybe his son, maybe some of his students, rewrote it on a piece of parchment with a feather. And that lasted for 3,000 years. That alone is miraculous. How do we have those words? But miraculously, the words of Amos are coming to life now. We are the next chapter in the story of the Bible. In fact, if there's a Bible being written right now about this generation, the prophet just hasn't come yet to write it. But it's being written. Now we can understand that that's true. Then really the Torah is guiding us to see ourselves in a very certain context and to see each other in a certain context. That means that all of us are characters in the unfolding story of God that's happening right now. And really, this is probably the best chapter of the book. I mean, if you think about it, the prophecies of the Bible are really unbelievable. First, Israel is going to be this eternal people. That's pretty remarkable. I mean, we are the only people of ancient times that are alive today. All of the people that we read about in the Bible, all of them are gone. The Amorites, the Canaanites, the Jebusites, the ancient Egyptians, there's no pharaohs anymore. They're Muslims in Egypt now. The Babylonians, the Persians, they're all gone. Only Israel, this one eternal people. But then in the same book it says, oh, by the way, if you don't act righteously in the land of Israel, I'm going to scatter you across the world. And once you're scattered, I'm going to persecute you like you've never been persecuted, like no people will ever be persecuted. Well, that's pretty illogical. The last thing you would want to do to an eternal people is to scatter them around the world and then persecute them. With no common language, no forms of communication, how will the Jewish people stay Jewish if we're scattered around the world with no emails, no fax machines? How will it ever happen? But we're not just going to be persecuted. I mean, sometimes you read the words of the prophets, and we've read so many of them just in the times of Tisha B'Av. It sounds like, oh, the prophets, they're flowery language. They must be exaggerating it. How bad could it be? It was an understatement how bad it could have been. Every single curse that was written in the book has manifested over the last 2,000 years on the skin and heart and soul of the Jewish people. Every single one of them. But then somehow, this people is set to be a light to the nations. It's just the whole thing doesn't make any sense. And then as we're gone, the land is going to lay barren. The land is going to lay barren. That's just also a remarkable reality. I mean, geographically, Israel is the center of the world. It connects Asia to Africa to Europe. Every empire since Nebuchadnezzar, who destroyed the first temple, tried to control the land of Israel. It makes sense, like all the major highways went through this land. All of the empires, with all of their money and all of their funds, The Babylonians, the Persians, the Medes, the Greeks, the Romans, the Turkish, the British. I mean, it goes on and on. All of them tried, and all of them failed. The Bible says the land is going to lay barren as long as the Jews are not here. And imagine, the land locked herself up like a treasure chest, waiting for the Jewish people to return to unlock her beauty. And now look at this land. It's like come back to life. And the Hebrew language has been resurrected. I asked my dad, Abba, how did that happen? I mean, it happened in my dad's generation. How did the Hebrew language, I mean, Zephaniah says the language is going to be restored. It's actually going to be an international language. That's what Zephaniah, the same way that English is today, that Greek was at one point, soon Hebrew will be the international language. You can understand that. I mean, as soon as our priorities are set straight and we care a little bit more about our soul and less about our body, everyone's going to want to know Hebrew. We're going to want to read the Bible in its original tongue. When God created the world, he didn't say, let there be light. He said, Vayehi or. The whole world was created through the Hebrew language. So people eventually are going to want to know Hebrew. And it's already happening. I mean, just let's look at this international group of running. Has anyone started investigating the Hebrew language?
Yes.
I just want you to know, like 80 years ago, there was no Hebrew language. Jews didn't speak Hebrew. Jews did not speak Hebrew. So I said, Abba, how did that happen? How did a dead language just all of a sudden just come to life? I mean, Hebrew was like Latin. Rabbis, scholars studied it. It was in our prayer books. Jews used to read it, not really even understanding what they were saying, but it was there written by prophets. So we tried to learn a little, but no one spoke Hebrew. My children today, their mother tongue is Hebrew. How did that happen, Abba? I want to know. And so my dad said, well, your grandfather had to speak to me in a language that he didn't really know consistently, in a language that didn't really exist, and trust that everyone in the land of Israel would do the same irrational thing. And lo and behold, every Jew from all around the world came to the land of Israel, and everyone did the same irrational thing. And in one generation, the Hebrew language was resurrected from the dead. Now imagine where the Jewish people were 76 years ago. Israel today has the strongest military in the Middle East. We have one of the strongest economies in the world. The shekel now is one of the most powerful currencies in the world. From what? 76 years ago, there was nothing here. There was no economy. There were no trees. There was nothing. And it's like, wow, we are literally living right now in the best and greatest chapter of the book. But we're inside it. See, sometimes outside of Israel, the Bible can be like legends and fairy tales and stories and just very abstract. When you come here in London, you're walking in it. You literally are a three-dimensional character in the unfolding story of God. But then once you experience that, you go back to your country and that never leaves you, because you realize that you've been sent now from this land to go light up wherever country that you're from. You know, think about that. My grandfather's name was Mordechai. The last person we know on our family tree is my grandfather's grandfather. His name was Zev, which means wolf. And sometimes I think, especially I haven't left Israel in a long time because the mountain has just swallowed me up. But the last time that I left Israel, I was at Ben Gurion Airport. And all of a sudden, I just had like this vision. And I was like, wow, imagine if my grandfather's grandfather were here at Ben Gurion Airport. Now, Ari and I, we've had the pleasure or the honor of speaking in almost every continent in the world. I've been at every fancy airport that there is. Sydney, New York, LA, London. Ben Gurion Airport is the nicest airport in the world. It's the most convenient airport in the world. It's one of the newest airports in the world. It is literally world class. So I imagine my grandfather's grandfather coming to Ben Gurion Airport. And he goes through security, and then there's this long moving sidewalk that takes you to the waiting area. And I'm sure already then he'd be like, a moving sidewalk. Wow, that would blow his mind already. But then on the side, the last time that I was there, it had all of the innovation and Nobel Prizes that Israel had won. And so he'd be on this moving sidewalk and he'd look at the drip irrigation technology and games theory Nobel Prizes and economic Nobel Prizes. And he's like, wow, the country is changing the world. This little country has all these innovations and all of these things that have already been a blessing to so many people. And then he would see black Jews from Ethiopia and brown Jews from Morocco and tall blonde Jews from Russia. And then he'd look around and be like, wow, there's Chinese people here and there's Africans here. And they're all coming to the land of Israel. When I was there, it was right around Sukkot time. They're all coming here to celebrate Sukkot. And then he would see a soldier. And that would, I'm sure, terrify him. Because when you saw a soldier in Bialystok, that was not a good sign for the Jews, ever. But then when the soldier turns, he would see a Star of David and 2 blue stripes over it. Because it was an IDF soldier. I have no doubt that my grandfather's grandfather would be like, okay, so where is he? Where is he? We said, well, where is he? Well, where's Mashiach? He must be here. Look at this place. This is unbelievable. And you know, that's the thing. He wouldn't be wrong for saying that. The way the Jewish people understand Mashiach, he is walking amongst us now. I mean, we believe he's going to be born like a man, born into this world with a mother and a father. He's going to be like King David. And if we believe, like what Ari said, that we believe he's going to come every day, that means maybe he's in his 20s now, maybe he's in his 30s. Maybe he's a general in the army. Maybe he's hidden away in a yeshiva in the back alleys of Mea Sharim. We have no idea. But he's probably walking amongst us right now. And the truth is, a lot of people, both Jews and Christians, have and had a misconception. They're like, well, I'm just going to wait here and I'm going to pray and Messiah's just going to come and everything is going to be great. That's not really the Torah way. If you have a sickness, then of course you pray to God for the sickness to be healed. But then you go to the chicken soup, you know? And then you go to the doctor if you need surgery. It's not that that's like, when it comes to Israel, we're just going to wait for the Messiah to pick us up out of Brooklyn and take us to Israel. That's just not the way it is in any aspect of a Torah life at all. And so people have been waiting on the sidelines, but the truth is, God is giving us such an opportunity to find our place within the story and to make it count, to make it beautiful. We are the authors of our own story within that marvelous story. And that means we can make it a work of art. We can make it a masterpiece. We can take the biggest role that we can possibly handle, pick up the largest burden possible, and then make our story really count. And that's what this is really all about. We talked about all these prophecies that have already manifested. Well, really the next stage in this process, I think, is like what's happening here. Because eventually at some point the Jewish people need to take our place in the world. And the Jews, we're not comfortable with it, and the nations aren't comfortable with it yet. But we talk about, restoration, fixing, and rebuilding. That's the process here. There is a divine order that needs to be restored. There's a divine order in the world. Israel has a specific task, a specific place in the world. And the Torah tells us what we're meant to be. We are meant to be a priestly nation. What does that mean? That we're the priests. If you go to the temple, I, for example, am not a priest. Within Israel, we can understand our role in the world by just understanding Israel. When I go to the temple, I'm an Israelite. I can't be a priest. There are priests that are designated to be priests and Levites that are designated to be Levites. They have a very specific task and role. It's not my role. They're not better than me. They're not holier than me. They just have a different task, a different order that they've been born into. Their job is to bless me and to teach me. They're the priests. Beautiful. What does that mean for Israel? If we're the priestly nation, then we have a very specific task here. We are meant to bless you. We're meant to teach you Torah. When the world finally gets that the Torah is a verb, the word Bible is a terrible word. Bible means book. Torah is a verb. It literally means a guide. It is guiding. It is now. It is Torah. It is happening now. It's thing. It's not like a Bible, dusty book on a shelf. Definitely not the Old Testament. That's really a terrible name. Torah is a living verb that is meant to guide us now. Well, here's the thing. The Jews, we're experts at the Torah. That's our thing. We're not very good builders. There's no giant monuments here in Israel. We built this Gesher Meitarim, the string bridge at the entrance to Jerusalem. And Israel's like, wow, look at the string bridge. Okay, I've seen bigger and nicer buildings. Thank you very much. But we're experts at the Torah. I mean, imagine almost 3,000 years ago. We've held on to the Torah and the words of the prophet for 4,000 years. And every force known to humanity came to take that Torah away from us. The Catholics tried to convert us. The Muslims tried to submit us. And we held on to the Torah with all of our heart and all of our soul and all of our might. And we would not let go. And we knew that it was going to come true. And we knew that one day God would bring us back. Why did we hold on to the Torah? It wasn't for us. It was for you.
Yeah.
Because one day the world would wake up and be like, come, let us go to the Mount of Olives.
Yeah.
Let's go to the mountain of God and learn Torah and learn to walk in his ways. This is the beginning of the book of Isaiah, is that vision.
Yeah.
That the Torah will go forth out to the world from Zion and from Jerusalem. I have a pastor friend of mine. I think he has like 20,000 people in his church. And he's like a young guy, he's like mine, Ari's friend. Like he's our age. That's a pretty big responsibility. There's no shul in the world that has 20,000 people. That just doesn't exist. And so he lands on our farm in a helicopter. And that was like quite an entrance. And we spent the day together. And then he told me this amazing story. He was in Afghanistan or Pakistan, and he was dealing with a village that had just been pillaged and destroyed by ISIS. And he went there to bless the people and to bring them some humanitarian aid and to like just bring a little bit of light to them. And I looked at him like, Jews are never gonna do that. I just have never heard of a Jew flying to Afghanistan and going to, the Jewish people are the stewards and custodians of this little land. That's our job. We're meant to be the custodians of this land. And then when the nations come, we're meant to bless them. But this pastor said something so beautiful to me. He said, Jeremy, you're the most Jewish Jew I've ever met. It says to me and Ari, you are Jews in the heart of Judea. I don't know how to explain this to you, but I know the more you are rooted here, the stronger you are here in Judea, the stronger I am in America.
Yeah.
You are the root.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to Afghanistan. I can barely leave my mountain. You want me to go to Afghanistan? But that's amazing. That my somehow being in Judea is a blessing to him. Bringing prayers and blessings to Afghanistan. That's a restoration. That's awesome. That's marvelous. I've had, and Ari have I had, 10,000 hours of arguments with Christians. And you should know, we love arguing. Jews love arguing. It's awesome. It's Torah study. This verse, how's your interpretation, what's that interpretation? And that's beautiful. But just in the last few years, I feel like I've come to a place where what is going to bring us all together? Jerusalem is going to bring us all together. And Isaiah says something very specific about Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. He said it's going to be a Beit Tefillah Lekol Ha'amim, a house of prayer for all nations. And that's interesting. It's not called a house of Torah study for all nations. Even though in the same verse they're coming here to learn the ways of God, to walk in the light, they want to know how to live a good life, they want to live by God's will, because God's will hasn't changed. He gave us his will in the Torah, and it hasn't really changed yet. Right is right and wrong is wrong still. But what is the temple actually called? A house of prayer for all nations. Prayer actually has the power to bring us all together, because what happens then? The arguments become irrelevant. All of a sudden we're praying to God. So who cares? If you're right, if I'm right, once we're all praying together, people come into the temple and there's Levites and priests and there's an entire orchestra of music. And we're all just worshiping and praying God together. Awesome. And I feel like that may be the answer. And so Ari, my farm, it's situated right in the mountains of Ziph. The 23rd chapter of the book of Samuel, David runs to the mountains of Ziph to hide from Saul before he becomes king. According to the Midrash, most of the book of Psalms was written in those mountains before David became king. And so somehow Hashem has connected us, aligned us with this place that the book of Psalms came into the world. You could be a nun in Germany, a Catholic in Brazil, a Protestant in New York, a Jew in Jerusalem. We all open up the words of King David to pray. King David taught the whole world how to pray. But those prayers came into the world right in the heart of Judea. And so I thought, what is the right way to reconcile? What is the right way to actually bring us all together? Because the past is the past, and people aren't asking for forgiveness, and we can't change them anyway. But what we can do is, I think we can sing and pray. I think that really is the answer. And so maybe if this is the last event of the night, now I'll get my guitar and we'll do a song together.
Yeah.
This is Psalm 150. It's the last psalm of the book. It's David's last prayer. It's his last hope and his last aspiration. And he gives us the key. He has this last vision of the end of days in the last verse of the book, his final prayer. And he says, Kol haneshama tehallelia, hallelujah. All souls will praise God. Hallelujah. You know, hallelujah is a Hebrew word. It means hallelujah, praise, Yah is God. And that's pretty amazing because the most international word in the world is hallelujah. You can go to Hong Kong, you can go to Germany. We've had groups from Hungary, from Holland, America. Everyone knows the word hallelujah. And so imagine you can come into one place together, not knowing each other, different cultures, different languages, but we can sing hallelujah together and know exactly what we're all saying. So there's a place where we can, all souls can come together to praise God. Hallelujah. And so maybe that's what we'll do. Just that one word. Hallelujah. So no one knows who wrote this song. I put it out as a part of my album. The rest of my album are melodies that came to me. This one is an ancient melody. And no one knows who wrote it. Legend has it dates back to the first temple. I made up that legend. But it's special and it's Middle Eastern. And it's just amazing to think that King David is on his way back here soon. All right. So this is how it goes.